Welcome, everyone. We are really excited to jump in and to show off what we are doing today. This is Intro to Coding, creating a music visualizer with AI. I'm joined by two incredible guests today who we're very lucky to have on stage with us here. And I will introduce them in just a moment. Just to get started, a couple housekeeping things. The event today will be around an hour and a half. You guys are welcome to jump off and on anytime. We also have a chat function. Really encourage everyone to use it. Ask questions throughout. Don't wait. Just put them in there and we'll try to get to them all. Anything else you want to say, feedback, questions, anything like that. So we can go ahead and begin. So to start, my name is Maddie. I work for CircuitStream. I'm the Partnership Development Manager. My job really revolves around building relationships, creating industry partners, and ultimately my goal is to get job seekers in our career program within our boot camps closer to jobs and expand their professional networks, ideally to get everybody who comes out of our boot camps hired. I've brought in a couple guests today from both CircuitStream and from TikTok to chat with us about software development, software engineering, and to answer any questions that you'd like to know about beginner level coding, working in Seattle, being a software engineer, all that kind of stuff. So a bit about the event today. We will start with a kickoff. Obviously, that's right now. I'll jump into about a 25-minute interview with Nathan. We'll move on to a live demo with our instructor, Randy, and then we'll do a wrap-up in Q&A. That'll be your chance to ask any last lingering questions. But like I said, feel free to put questions in the chat throughout and to kind of go with whenever you have a question. A little bit about CircuitStream. So we began back in 2015 through a network of developers and designers and creators. We are now a leading provider in learning in software development, but also product management, game development, and game design. We partner with industry-leading companies, such as the ones up on the screen, to provide training and courses for those looking to pivot into a career in tech or just to upskill or learn more about technologies. So since we've started back in 2015, we've educated over 50,000 learners globally. We're constantly updating our curriculums to stay ahead of the curve, to stay industry relevant. So one thing that we do, which sets us apart from other bootcamp providers in the tech space, is that we are partnered with universities to deliver our programs. So universities such as the University of Washington in Seattle partner with us to deliver them through their continuing education programs so that teenagers and adult learners have the backing of a top-tier university when they get their micro-credentials with us. Most recently, and kind of the reason we're here today, is that we have partnered with the University of Washington in Seattle to expand our US market. So right now, I'm in Calgary in Canada. Randy, who's one of our instructors, is in Vancouver in Canada. But most recently, we are trying to grow in the States. So you can see a couple of our US-based universities, but we are here to chat about careers specifically in Seattle. Our fall boot camps are open for registration. So if at any point today you want to learn more, there is a little QR code up at the top, excuse me, but I will also put a link right now in the chat where you guys can go and explore what we're doing in Seattle and everything starting in the fall. So jumping on in here, the first part of this event, we are going to chat with the incredible Nathan, who is here from TikTok. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with the app or scrolls on it for 8 hours a day like myself, but Nathan is a software engineer and is here today to chat with you about all things working in software in Seattle. So Nathan, thank you for joining us. Welcome. How's it going today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's going well. It's going well.
Good. Awesome. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Why don't you go ahead and start off by walking us through your career journey and how you ended up at TikTok?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think to go through my career journey, I'm actually a career switcher and I'm a bootcamp graduate as well. So I did a bootcamp I started July 2020 and then I finished in October. So mine was an accelerated program where, I spent like 3 or 4 months doing like the coding bootcamp, learning what coding is, what a variable is, because I barely had any clue how how it worked. And then I went from after the boot camp, I got my first job at a startup. And then I just moved from startup to startup to startup and then to TikTok. So it was quite a long journey. But I spent maybe 4 years or 3 years in the startup space before applying to TikTok. But it was quite fun, I would say. And just learning coding was life-changing for me. So yeah, that was like my too long didn't read for my brief journey so far.
Yeah, awesome. And it's cool that you started from sort of ground zero. What would you say is one of the main reasons that you chose to go the boot camp route instead of a traditional 4-year degree, for example?
Yeah, so I actually graduated from college, I think in 2015. So I was quite several years outside of school, and I was working in a different industry. I was doing like graphic design and like media, doing like photography and like wedding stuff, basically full time. And it was during COVID, I had a lot of extra time because we couldn't go out anywhere. And I had other friends that were like, hey, like, have you thought about bootcamp? Because for freelancing and all my wedding stuff, it all dried up during COVID. So it was a little harder to find some work. But with all the extra time, I wanted to find like another skill set to use. And with graphic design, there's like the concept of like HTML and CSS, but never JavaScript. That was like the most intimidating thing ever, until I just started watching a couple YouTube videos, and I was like, oh, like, it was like how to make a clock, right, using coding. And I thought that was the most amazing thing ever. I was like, how does this work? And like, what is this magic? But because of that, and after I found myself watching a YouTube video on making a clock at 2 in the morning, I was like, oh, maybe I should try like a boot camp. And before doing the whole boot camp, they actually have like a pre-work course where it's like, hey, if you can get through this and you're mildly interested and you're not too intimidated, this might be a good route for you, right? So I ended up doing it in about I think 2 weeks or so, just daily, trying to learn coding, trying to learn some basic concepts. And then I committed, and it was probably one of the best decisions of my life.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I like that you have that artistic background. I feel like that gives you a really holistic approach to software, especially because you work in a visual app, right? So that's really cool. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I know that for a lot of aspiring software developers and junior software developers, breaking into tech and especially jobs at big companies like TikTok, it's really hard. And it's hard to find your niche and your foot in the door. But you did something really smart, which is starting at a startup, because often startups need software development help. And they're really good for project-based stuff, and they're open to all levels. So what would you say is some of the main differences between working for a startup and working for somewhere like TikTok?
Yeah, I think what I enjoyed the most about my career journey is I'm really glad I went into the startup space first, because I think it's hard. It's not easy by any means. But then in the startup space, you have to learn a lot of hats, or you have to learn to wear a lot of hats. You have to learn how the whole software development life cycle, how it takes place, and you have a lot more hands-on experience from building things. So once you build and spend 10 hours on something and then it breaks on you, you know exactly why. And this is from years and years of things just breaking on me, even sometimes during client demos in the startup space. But, I think it taught me to be very considerate. It taught me to, why things break and why things work. And I don't think I would have gotten that unless I did the startup space. And so I think at big tech companies, there's a lot more guardrails and guidelines, right? So I kind of think of it as learning how to drive manual versus learning how to drive an automatic car.
Right.
When you do an automatic car, you can just press on it, but you don't always have to know why it's happening or what's going on. So I think the startup space taught me that.
That is a great analogy. I've also worked in the startup space, and it is such a good way to get so much good experience. So
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah. So thinking about TikTok in
Mhm.
general, uh, getting a little peek behind the curtain. You can definitely put your dog on camera if you'd like.
Oh, no. She's behind a closed door in the living room.
What is a day in the life for you at work right now?
Yeah, I think a day in the life right now, it's, let's see, when I go into the office, it's usually catching up on messages, looking at emails and other, the schedule for the day. Part of it is TikTok is a very global company. So I collaborate with teams around the world in Singapore and China, and many other time zones just to see like what gets done because just for some context, I work on TikTok Shop, and we work with a lot of creators, right? So we're just building out different tools, and yeah, I'll do some consultation, or I'll respond to a lot of these messages once I'm at the office. I'll grab lunch, and then I'll do a bit of coding for a little bit, and then I'll catch up with some of my coworkers to see what the status of some projects are. I'm currently mentoring a couple engineers and, seeing like, hey, are there any fires? Do we have to put out any fires? If so, okay, let me like dive into your code and see what's going on. And then after that session, I would say the other like 30 to 40% is going on meetings, what needs to get built, what's the status of things, talking to product managers and, aligning expectations. I would say for a lot of software engineering, you will always have PMs like either in the back of your head or in front of you asking you questions.
Mhm, totally. You said something interesting, putting out fires. Now, I know I am not a technical person, but one thing when we bring Randy up later to do some live coding, no pressure, there's seems to be always something with your code.
Mm-hmm.
Break, like you said, a fire, a bug, something like that. Talk to us about like coming to terms with that as a software engineer is that there's probably always going to be a break in your code. What is that like? How do you overcome that? Things like that.
Oh my gosh. There's so many ways to try to address, a fire, but it only takes a spark, right? And it can happen anywhere at any time. But I would say a fire could be when we're coding. I would say most engineers, we coding the happy path is very easy. It's very simple. Like it's the most pleasant thing to do, and is very, I would say, simple. But then when you have a lot of button interactions or clicking and like an input field like a search bar, for example, then that's when a lot of unhappy paths can happen, right? What if your user is using something in an unintended way? What if they're using a search bar for like they're trying to copy and paste bolded text, for example, or like rich text. How do we want to handle something like that, right? Or what about like a phone number input field? How does a phone number like country code work, right? If a phone input field has, how it's like a +1 or like all the country codes for Canada and US, is like which flag do we display? Because it could be a Canadian flag, it can be a American flag, and there are just so many random edge cases that could happen. And because of that, we usually need to have guardrails. For example, we can have unit testing. Unit testing, you can have QA or quality assurance engineers trying to break your code before it goes to everyone else. And then we also have alarm systems. And quite often, those alarm systems are because something is breaking. There's this concept of like a JavaScript error, and that's when your code is breaking in a production environment and it alerts us. Sometimes we might expect an API, or basically when the front end is calling from the back end or from a server for data. What if the server doesn't respond properly with data? How should we handle that? And so those are some fires that we put out. And sometimes it's just a framework, depending on if you're using, a lot of people might be familiar with like React. or something like Angular or Vue, sometimes they just work in their own niche ways, and not everyone will know how those work.
Right. Yeah. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And I would imagine the pressure with TikTok being something that millions of users are on. If something breaks, you're going to find out about it pretty quickly, I would imagine, with feedback. So having to be really nimble is important, I'd imagine. What tools or languages or frameworks do you use the most at TikTok? I'm going to put a list of what our software bootcamp includes. But yeah, what do you use?
Ooh, okay. I use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and I use another type of JavaScript called TypeScript, React, some React Native. We use Node. And so I see this list, and I would say almost all of it is something we use or some variation of it. And I would say, I hope when I say that, I'm not intimidating anyone, because that's a lot of different technologies.
Yeah,
I don't think everyone's expected to know everything 100%,
definitely.
but over the years, you'll get comfortable with it, I would say. Or you have some notion of it and have a preference.
Right, 100%.
Yeah, Node.net from, I see what Becky Buckler said.
Yeah, lots and lots and lots of different ones. So how would you describe, kind of getting out of the coding part of things, how would you describe the pace and the culture at TikTok, and what has it been like working at such a big company?
Yeah, I would say the pace of and culture. TikTok is pretty scrappy in the way it feels like a startup in many ways. But then I still feel like at the end of the day, I feel safer because, if you're in the startup space, quite often, if you're thinking about it, you'll hit like, runway or like valuations or like client demos. And I would say those stakes feel higher. But then I think in the big tech space around TikTok, there's a lot of other like resources or people that we can talk to for help. If anything like escalates, it's a lot easier to. So I would say that's why I feel appreciative of that. And then also with the TikTok, it's like there are many ideas that we can just try quite often. And, it's not as much pressure, I think, compared to in the startup space. The only other pressure would be like being able to build and being an owner of your code. I think TikTok fosters a lot of like, I would say you are responsible for your work and you should be like the main stakeholder for your work, right? And I think that gives me a lot of ownership. And I would say I really appreciated that. And so I've become like a point of contact for basically one of the features I work on sees about 3.5 million daily active users globally. And so it's really cool, but I would say it's high stakes. But then I still feel like, if I don't know what's going on, I can usually talk to like my senior engineer or like my mentors or my manager, and they'll usually like help me like put out my own fires, I would say.
Yeah, interesting. I think, the high stakes it's different with startups versus something like TikTok. Like you said, there's 3.5 million users on one side, but there's the crux of the startup business on the other side. So it's different.
Yeah.
Things. But that's a really good point, and something that I want to highlight for any job seekers out there is to look for some kind of software engineering or developer job that lets you take ownership of your project. So you don't just feel like a cog in the wheel, or that you're just writing lines of code all day long, but you have that sense of ownership. That's really important. I would love to pivot, and I hope this answers Robert's question a little bit, just kind of breaking into the industry. Do you have any tips for people who are just finishing a boot camp or are thinking about a boot camp from a career perspective and just want to get their foot in the door?
Yeah, for getting in so those are two questions, right? For boot camp and then like your first job. For boot camp, I would say do a pre-work course and see like if it's remotely interesting, if it's something that engages with you and it like scratches that itch. I would say then, you might be a good candidate, because I would say a lot of people will be able to finish a pre-work course, but if they like hated it and it was not interesting, I would say maybe it's not for for you. But, you know, if it's interesting and you're like, wow, that was kind of fun. It's like putting puzzle pieces together. I would say like, oh, there's a chance, you know, and maybe you should lean into that. For the first job for coding interviews, I would say software engineering is different from a lot of other careers where you can do just a behavioral interview and it's like a good culture fit. But I would say learning how coding works, and like there's a lot to technical interviews, but researching technical interviews and getting very sharp on that is probably like the best advice I can have for, I'd say, larger tech companies. If you're going into the startup space, I think more product ownership and how features work and how to build a feature is a lot more important than, you know, the technical interview. But it's like, hey, I built a Netflix clone, I built an Instagram clone. I know how like I can make a blogging application, and that will generally give you an edge versus someone that has never built anything before, especially when you're in the startup space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point. And one thing I want to highlight about our boot camps at CircuitStream is that we have an opt-in career program. We're really career focused. So one thing that we do is our courses are project based. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but essentially we want all of our bootcamp learners to finish with a portfolio. And portfolios are really important. Like you just said, it's important to demonstrate that you know what you're doing and that you have actual projects behind you, and that can really help you get your foot in the door. We also do lots of like interview preparation, technical interview stuff, resume building, all that kind of stuff with the career side so that you can also get into it. So I'm glad you highlighted that. The career aspect is important. I think some people think that maybe a boot camp or a certificate is like a meal ticket into a job, but it's a lot of other things that are coming into play with building your online brand and things like that. So yeah, Robert, let us know if we answered your question or not. We did get another question from Anna about specific coding languages. Anna said she was at a coding webinar and they said the top 2 coding languages that they were highly recommended to her for new programmers are Python and Golang. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I would say, so I am a software engineer, but I focus on front end. And I have built out my career on purely JavaScript, basically.
Cool.
I can like look at Java and Python and stuff, and I can kind of like understand what's going on. But depending on what you're going for, that's what it would help you choose or decide on your language. You know, if you're interested in backend, or if you're interested in like building, I guess, like scripts or going into the AI space or machine learning, I think Golang and Python will definitely take you very far. But as a front-end engineer, I'm a little biased in saying like there's still a world where you don't have to learn that. But I work with backend engineers daily, and you know they use Golang and Python, mainly Golang. But I would say if you go into one language and then you go deep into that language, it will be enough, or it's sufficient to build a career, I will say.
Yeah, right. I've heard that before from other engineers. It's demonstrate a willingness to be flexible, demonstrate an ability to learn at least one language, and it'll still put you on the employability scale pretty high because you've done it before, you can demonstrate it, and you know that if you need to, you can learn another one. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What is something you wish you knew about software engineering or anything else related to your job when you were just starting out as a junior developer?
What's something? Oh, I think what would have helped me first is, and this is kind of like something I talk to everyone about, is I think hard work beats talent in the software engineering space. There will be a lot of really smart people and really brilliant people that will, I guess, they will make you feel imposter syndrome a lot, right? And I think that's something where, you know, I still deal with it like often with imposter syndrome. But I think part of it is just the belief that hard work beats talent will get you really far, I think, in the software engineering space. Because I think there will always be something to learn. There will always be like new problems to be solved. And as long as you keep trying, I think it will pay off. I would say even for the technical interviews, some people will be really smart and it might be annoying how smart they are. But I would say if you do the grind and you learn and you try and really apply yourself really hard, I will say that the results will be undeniable. But I say this because I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy, but just apply yourself and try. And and then also find a mentor. I think finding a mentor and someone with a few years more experience is invaluable.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think our boot camps are 36 weeks and they're pretty intensive. And we've heard that people are like, whoa, I saw boot camp and I thought, oh, this will be like a chill thing to do. It's not that chill. It's pretty intense, but you come out of it knowing so much. And the mentorship thing is huge. One thing we do in our career program is help people find mentors. So it's good to know. And I know that you do some mentoring at TikTok. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And I would say, if I can say one thing, I like that Circuit Stream is a 36-week program. And this isn't like an ad or plug. But I really do think like, I would say I felt unprepared coming out of I think mine was a 12-week boot camp. And there was a lot that like I had mentors to help me through after. But I would say like having a 36-week program is probably pretty huge. That like extra chunk of time is probably very impactful.
Yeah, I like to think so. Yeah, we're not just trying to get you to the finish line quickly. We're trying to make sure you understand and you're employable, really.
Yeah, I wish my bootcamp was longer, I would say.
Awesome. Good to know. We have a question from Robert, but it's also something that I would love to ask you. Do you use AI day to day? And what are your thoughts on AI in software engineering?
Yeah, I would say I use AI like daily. But I was really skeptical until more recently because I think AI, if you use it too much, it becomes more of a crutch. And AI can write a lot of code that looks right, but isn't right, if that makes sense. And sometimes it'll write like 200 lines of code and you'll be like, oh, that looks amazing. But then when you deploy it or when you test it, it's like, oh, it doesn't work at all. And sometimes it can make your spend a minute using AI to write code and then spend 5 hours debugging it, right? Versus, you spend 2 hours writing code, something like that. It's a trade-off. I think AI is definitely improving, but it's really important to understand why or what it's doing so that you can correct it. So I think in the future, it'll be more of like software engineers utilizing AI more so than AI replacing us in our space. Yeah, I'm seeing terms like vibe coding and see many new coding models released. Some coding models, they're very verbose and it's really cool. But yeah, I would say vibe coding, I don't really trust vibe coding that much. But I use it pretty regularly and it's more so I tell the AI what I want and why I want it. And I'm really specific. When you're specific, it's really helpful. If you're just like, hey, build an app, it can look like an app, but it probably is very broken. I hope that can answer the question.
100%. And I think, Robert, let us know if we didn't answer your question, but this is something we're going to dive into with Randy a little bit later when he does the music visualizer demo. He's going to show you how important it is to still have a software engineer who knows what they're doing, even when you're using AI, because AI can break stuff. It's not perfect. And I think that you make a good point. I think there's some fear around, oh my gosh, AI is going to replace software engineers. But I think if that does happen, we are so far away from that because AI is just not able to do what people can do yet. And cool. One last question for you, and then we'll make sure we answer all of the audience questions. What is the tech scene like in Seattle, and what's it like working in tech there?
The tech scene, I would say, there's a very bright tech scene. A lot of the top companies, I would say, globally or in the world are based in Seattle. And Seattle is just a very beautiful area. If you're into hiking, outdoors, my wife and I, we like to be outside a lot when it's not, raining. But it's a good space to be in. Seattle is, sorry, my headphone came out. I think there are a lot of tech jobs in Seattle. And it's a very tech city, I would say.
Nice. Yeah, cool. I think I know Randy is in Vancouver. You can probably talk a little bit more about this later. I know Vancouver, Calgary has a very booming startup tech scene. Toronto, Montreal, Seattle, these are all really big tech hubs. So it's definitely still a good time to get into tech, I would say. Awesome. Do you have anything else that you'd love to share with people thinking about doing a boot camp or thinking about a career in tech? Any other advice, words of wisdom?
Good question. I would say if you're interested in bootcamp and you're gonna commit to it, I would say commit to it. I don't think it's something. I know some bootcamps have offered like part-time. I would say part-time enrollment, but I would say you should just go full all in, and it will only help you. The more you focus on it and try like your best, I think it will only you will get out what you put in, And if it's busy, I understand it. The cards may not work, but I'm really glad I did like an immersive bootcamp, and that was very helpful for me.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great to know. And like anything, like any education, you do get out what you put into it. And 36 weeks doesn't sound like a long time, probably feels like a long time. But you get to the end and I feel like you'll just know so much. So thank you so much, Nathan. We're going to move along to the demo, but I really appreciate you being here. And if you want to plug anything, any projects you're working on, anything, please go ahead. For those of you in the audience, Nathan will stick around for a few more minutes if you want to throw any last minute questions his way. In the meantime, we're going to move along to the demo portion of this event. But thank you again, Nathan, and I hope to see you around soon. And thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I have one final shout out, but my career wouldn't have been like possible without my amazing wife. She's actually in the chat right now. I see her there. But yeah, I would say everyone needs a Yerim in their life. And so I'm very grateful and appreciative of her.
That's awesome. Well, shout out to your wonderful wife. And we all need a wife to support us, don't we? Shout out Yerim. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you again. Randy, if you could come up onto the stage, we will move on to your portion. Thank you again, Nathan. So Randy is here with us. Randy is a software developer for our company Circuit Stream. He is based out of the Vancouver area, and he is going to walk us through a really cool music visualizer app. So while he's getting set up, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then Randy, you can go ahead and share yours. While Randy is getting set up, I do have a couple questions for the audience. One, I would like to call out, Nathan just put his LinkedIn on the chat. So if you'd like to connect with Nathan, please go ahead and click on that. I would like to know where everyone is joining us from. I'm here from Calgary. I'd love to see where you guys are from. Nice. We've got Redmond, Tacoma. Nice. Washington natives out here. That's awesome. Seattle. Good to see you from Seattle. Spokane. Nice. Awesome. Oceanside, California. That sounds wonderful. Cool. A lot of Washington folks in the room today. That's awesome. Another Seattle, Everett. Awesome. Cool. I have another question for all of you. How new are you to coding? I've just put that in the chat. I am a total novice. I've never written a line of code. I have no idea how to code, but that's why Randy's here. So anyone else want to share how new you are to coding? That's going to help Randy determine how much lingo he's going to use. Intermediate? Awesome. 8 years. Sweet. Some professionals. 3 years. Cool. Above novice. Nice. You are doing better than me. Cool. Okay. Okay, so a bit of a mix. Some new, some absolute professionals. We'll see what we can do. Cool. Last question I'm going to ask here before we throw it over to Randy. How often do you folks use AI in your daily life? I would say I use AI daily. I don't work in a technical role, but um, daily, 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 daily. Awesome. Well, like Nathan mentioned, I think more and more we're all relying on AI, but it has a place in software engineering for sure, like Randy will show you, but it is definitely not without its flaws. So here to kick off a little bit of a demo, I would love to introduce Randy, who is here from CircuitStream in Vancouver. How's it going today, Randy?
Fairly well, thanks. Yeah.
Good.
How about you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, Randy, what you do for CircuitStream, and anything else you'd like to share?
Sure. So I've been, I guess, a tech enthusiast ever since I was a kid. So largely, uh, uh, mostly self-taught. So I got started making websites using Dreamweaver. I don't know if anybody in the chat happens to know that, but that was where I got started making my basic sites. I've been with CircuitStream now for several months. I'm currently leading a software developer bootcamp, which has been going great. Got a lovely cohort of students. For things about me, I got started with programming just by being a tinkerer, essentially, and then a technical support company that I was working for was working on an internal project, and I happened to mention to somebody that I knew some JavaScript. And then one day they pulled me into a meeting and said, "Hi, so this senior dev has this great project and they're leaving today." And so I got about a 45-minute intro to their project, and then I took it over the next day. So that was my start anyway. And so since then, I've learned a lot. I spent many years freelancing. I worked for small businesses. I worked for large businesses, and for the last several years, I've been focusing more on teaching.
Awesome. And speaking of teaching, I know you are obviously a software developer teacher at CircuitStream. What is your favorite thing about being a software developing instructor?
I find it really rewarding to see the eureka, to see people's eyes light up when they click concepts together. I think that's probably what keeps me coming back to it. And just seeing people grow and overcome, because there are certain emotional hurdles. Like I know that there is some talking about imposter syndrome and that kind of thing, and so seeing people grow in their skill set and in their ability to grow in their own confidence is a makes the work very, very satisfying for me. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a great answer. And hopefully we get some eureka moments today, which I would love to throw it back over to you. Please go ahead and jump in with your demo. We did get a first question about what coding languages we're using today, but I'm sure you're going to get into all of that. So I will stop talking and throw it over to you. Thanks, Randy.
Sure, right on. Thank you. So my plan for today is to keep things relatively simple. So we'll be sticking with a vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript implementation. The goal is to build kind of a vaporwave aesthetic 2D music visualizer. So I don't have a ton in the way of prep here. I have a reference image that I'm going to be feeding into my AI model, and I have I've just got a little royalty-free, music track that I found online. So I suppose it looks like we've got a fair bit of experience with using these AI models daily, and I'm just curious where people find it the most useful, and then also where people tend to struggle with it, or where it doesn't seem to meet your goals or your expectations of what you would like it to do. Project management, right on. Oldest DJ is in his mid-50s. That's cool too. Right on. While people are replying here, one of the things that I have found has helped me with AI models is coming up with ways to provide as much context as possible, and to even use the AI to assist me in writing the most effective prompts. So Robert says the code is usually 90% good out of the box, but the last 10% can require lots of tweaking. Definitely, yeah. I have personally found it most effective as a prototyping tool, which is essentially what I'm going to be relying on for today. But so I have a pre-planned prompt sort of block here where I prime the agent with a process where it's going to generate the best possible prompt that I'm going to pass into that AI agent. My tool of choice here today is a AI integrated code editor called Cursor. So I've primed my AI agent, and I'm going to copy my reference image and paste that in, saying that my goal is to create a 2D music visualizer using vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in a vaporwave aesthetic. I created a learning plan with AI, and the AI next day pulled up a different version that wasn't covering my weak areas. Yeah, I would say that memory issues are still very common with some of these models for sure. So some of these models do a pre-reasoning step prior to actually giving a response, but the prompt that I provided it with initially primes it to help me generate the most useful and context-rich statement. So I'm going to go back and forth with this now, where it will essentially kind of interview me back and forth until we come up with something that we think is going to work. So here it said that you are an expert web developer specializing in creative coding and audio visualization. Your task is to provide a comprehensive guide to, so we don't need a comprehensive guide. Well, maybe that'll work. Explain how to, so it's not explaining, it's implementing and building the website. So we'll go back and forth and we'll see if we can get a slightly better prompt here. So I will now act as an expert web developer and generate necessary HTML. Now see here, it looks like it actually jumped ahead and started coding right away instead of waiting for me to provide additional information. So I'm going to stop it and say, don't code yet. Ask me clarifying questions until you know exactly what I want you to build. So I'm going to reject that first change that it made. Okay, so just use the reference images color palette. The background can be simple. The visualizer is what I'm focused on. Now, I don't even remember what the name is of the type of visualization that I'm looking for. I think it's a bar-based, so audio visualizer bars. We'll see if we can find another reference image. I want a bar style visualization, like the image provided. I can see now within the prompt it actually suggested frequency bars. Perfect. Okay. So nothing in the background needs to react. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to simplify the scope to reduce the possibility of it kind of going off the rails and sort of like hallucinating additional details that I haven't provided. Go that The audio input should be underneath the visual area. Okay. Now, because I clarified the file structure, it should know the 3 files that I'm looking for it to generate. Okay, so should the colors be like the second reference image? They should use Vaporwave color palette. Okay, so now it's generating our CSS. Now, for those of us who maybe are not super familiar with web technologies, this demo is being built up out of 3 constituent parts. We have our HTML, which I like to use the metaphor of like putting a house together, essentially. And so you can think of the HTML as being like the scaffolding for the house. Next, we have something called CSS. This controls the presentation layer, or how our content is displayed. So continuing along with the house metaphor, that's like the wallpaper and what actually gives the house its overall look. And then lastly, we have something called our JavaScript. And so the JavaScript is essentially like the say electrical utilities, or what adds interactivity to the home. Now we're going to see what we've got generated here. I'm going to accept all of these changes. Okay, now moment of truth here. We'll see whether we've got anything workable here. Now it looks like it doesn't recognize the file that I wanted it to play. So I'm going to pass that file in as context and say there is a file called drumbase.mp3 inside this project I want you to use. Now, for anybody who's actually, I'm just curious for the chat there. Is there anybody here who's never done any kind of HTML, CSS, or JavaScript coding before? Right on. Okay, right on, right on. So some of this might seem like kind of a foreign language a little bit today, but obviously with our circuit stream programs, that can really help to demystify things. Where from my own experience with running my own bootcamp, we take people who have never written a line of code in their lives, and by the end of it, you're making full stack, meaning from the front end of what the user interacts with to the backend server that controls the database and all of that stuff to make fully integrated applications capable of handling, user sign-in, keeping track of all of their data, and while creating beautiful user interfaces. So for anybody who's curious about that, our programs are designed to take people from wherever they currently are, whether you've coded before or you've never written code before, and we take you through all of the necessary technologies that you need to learn. Okay, so it looks like we made some changes. It was able to correctly identify the song, but it looks like it's animating on its own. Interesting. So it looks like it did an animated background. Now, I'm assuming here nobody can probably hear the sound that's playing. So let me just modify my screen share temporarily to share just that tab. Bear with me for just a moment. We'll go our Chrome tab with our music visualizer. There we go. I'll turn the volume down a little bit so it's not too loud. Excellent. Seems to be reactive here. Very nice. Yeah, the frame rate might be a little bit low on the live share here. Let me change my screen share back again. Looks like we've got another question saying, what tool is that? VS Code. So what I'm using is actually a fork, or it's essentially like they took the VS Code engine and then they built an entire AI suite of tools on top of VS Code. So this IDE is called Cursor, and it's integrated with a variety of the latest AI models. So it has models from Claude, from Google, from OpenAI that you can select from depending on their different strengths and weaknesses. So I'm going to see if I can make some additional modifications because I don't really love this background that we have here. So I'm going to see if I can get some clarity about what in our code is actually generating that background. So we'll go in and we'll have a look. We'll see there's an audio context, there's a change handler. There's something called draw mountains. Let's see where that comes from. We have a draw static background. I'm going to try and comment that function out. And it looks like that gets rid of that. And then do we still preserve the animation? Great. Excellent. Okay. Yes, they have already added Claude 4. They're very, very fast. Looks like we got a question saying, how do you deploy from Vaporwave onto a website? So are you referring to how I would go from the current state of this project on my local file system and getting that deployed to like a what we call a production server? Is that your question? You have a WordPress website with portfolio projects. Ah, I see. In the case of a WordPress site, you would need a server that's capable of hosting PHP because that's what's running under the hood for WordPress. So there's several providers out there that you could look into. There's SiteGround, there's Namecheap, there's lots of options out there. For something like this simple Vaporwave project, I would probably reach for something like GitHub Pages. So GitHub is a like online code repository where you can host content. And they have a system where you can publish a simple static site like the one that I've just created free of charge. So that would probably be my go-to for a project like this. Now, just out of curiosity here, is there anybody in the audience that has any concerns about where AI is going, or about how it might affect the job industry? At least this is something that I've found to be quite common with lots of my students over the past several years. So I'm just curious how people here feel about it. Yeah, John, I think I'm with you. I think I'm with you on that. I would say that anybody who says for sure that they know where these things are headed is probably has something to sell you, I suppose, right? You know, I have my own gut instincts on the matter, but I think you're right in the end that it's you know, we are dealing with a brand new technology, right? And so it's it can be quite difficult. You know, like I think there were probably people when the car was first invented that, oh, this is never going to replace my horse, right? But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you know, I live out in kind of like farm country. I can see horses out my window, right? And it's become a high profit art artisanal industry, right? So I think it's very, very difficult for us to see the way that technological advancements can take us, for sure. Microsoft and others laying off developers, it's like saying that they need less oxygen. That's been a very interesting thing, actually. I very recently saw there was the CEO of Duolingo who put out a post saying that they were looking at laying off workers and replacing things with AI. And then a couple days later, the CEO actually had to walk that back. Now, so Eugenio says it's going to change industry, but we don't understand the true impact. Yeah, correct. I would say, well, my take on it is it wouldn't surprise me if the companies that are doing layoffs today that believe that AI is going to solve all of their problems are probably going to discover that the companies who did not do that, who instead took their existing workforce and empowered them with AI tools such that they become considerably more productive, are going to run circles around the companies who let their staff go. So for me, I view the technological changes that we're going through in the same light that I interpret every other technological change that we've had in this space. So when I first started programming, I was programming in Notepad. And I was using a software called Dreamweaver. Some of my tools did not even have syntax highlighting. And so what I mean by that is everything was, all the code was all the same color. It was considerably harder to read. There was no intelligent autocomplete. There was none of that. And as time has gone on, our code editors have become considerably smarter with autocomplete, syntax highlighting, extension support, all of these things that have made our job more and more efficient, and it's made an individual developer more and more effective. So in my view, something that I think about is I like to use another metaphor of thinking about the invention of the telephone. So when the telephone was gaining popularity, it used to be a job to have operators that would actually with patch cables hook up different phone calls. Now, eventually that process went from analog to digital, which rendered that particular profession obsolete. But what I would say to you is that there are more people using the telephone today for work than there ever were back when that happened to be a particular profession. So for me, I view these tools as going from farming by hand to farming with a tractor. That's how it feels to me. In that, with these models, like if anything, again, I'm sharing my own personal views here, but it feels more like an augmenting of human intelligence than it being artificial intelligence. Now, I could really go down the rabbit hole there in terms of how these models are trained, and that obviously at the end of the day, it's trained on us, meaning that it's really our knowledge. And also with the importance of proper context and all of these surrounding details, as you can see with the amount of iterations that we had to go through in order to create a relatively simplistic tech demo, it's non-trivial. In that, if you there is an interest, I would say what's happening currently with vibe coding is well, what I really like about it is I feel like it's really democratizing these skills, and it's I think all of these AI tools, in fact, are actually really helping to unlock people's latent creativity. I think that there are lots of, accountants out there that are suddenly discovering they can express themselves through AI generative art, where they don't necessarily have another avenue for that kind of artistic expression. And so I do believe that what these tools do is they help unlock our own potential. And much like how, with the history of programming, I know that I think I saw that some people here are familiar with writing in slightly more legacy or older coding modalities. where you had to do a lot more manual memory management, and you had to think more like a machine. And I think that over the course of programming history, we went from punch cards to writing in assembly to C++ and to all these other languages that have allowed us to go up these layers of abstraction, where we have to think less and less like a machine, but we're still able to essentially what it really comes down to is the technologies change, but the how to think like a programmer doesn't change. Just going to read a couple things from the chat. So we have one person saying, so as a techie, just knowing how to use it is good enough, or do we need to know how to develop it even though I'm a hardware engineer? Ultimately, to take an idea from step 0 to a functioning business with monthly recurring revenue, you have to learn a whole host of skills. And I think that's one of the great things about our boot camps, in fact, is that between the career prep and us taking you through a litany of different technologies, the overall goal is to get you to think like a programmer, right? So I can see here we have, I'm just going to keep reading through the chat a little bit. Yeah, I would say, Robert, for me as well, that finding online generative AI art, actually my own personal sort of workflow is I use AI generative art to help me get my ideas out. And then I actually use a VR painting tool, and I use them as reference images and I paint them. And then I send them to a canvas shop, and I actually have several prints of them hung up in my home now. And I don't think I would have been able to do any of that, or I think it might have felt too intimidating had I not discovered some of those tools. Now, David says, I think of it like the difference between going to the library versus being able to Google anything. I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that it's people have been using Stack Overflow. They've been using Google for years, where it's not that important that you know everything, in that this industry is a bottomless pit of information, but your ability to quickly look up what you need to know to solve the task that's in front of you, and then ultimately having that generalized skill of knowing how to think like a programmer, is ultimately what can carry you through in this career. And that your ability to communicate what your code is doing, to be able to tell a coherent story about how your code operates, is and remains a priceless skill. I would agree with you, John, that ultimately it's still up to the discretion of the human processing the information that ultimately selects the code. And based on my understanding of these AI models, I don't see that changing. Again, in full light of to predict the future is tough. But from what I understand about how these models operate, I think that they need humans just as much as we need these tools. I have a question of, can we adapt? I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is to be willing to continue to learn. And so I think if you're the kind of person who loves who loves puzzles, this industry is a never-ending series of interesting puzzles. And so I think if you can cultivate an attitude like that, it will take you very far, and it will help you adapt to any changes that come up within this industry. I think that the skill of learning how to think like a programmer will remain an invaluable skill, no matter what outward expression that ability will take. For example, it would not surprise me, for example, if we move in a direction where a programmer would be doing something like managing a fleet of AI agents that are operating in parallel on various tasks, and then your role is to behave a little bit more like a project manager, but you still have to understand all the code being generated. And then you would work with these agents, and then potentially go in and make your own manual edits where necessary, in order to get the job done right, so to speak. I'll I just want to check, Maddie, how much time do I have left?
Yeah, you've got like 3 or 4 minutes left if you want to show us anything else, any cool tricks up your sleeve.
I don't know whether I'd have enough time to generate anything else, but I know that you were going to talk about potentially plugging projects later on. So I do have something that I could show that I've been working on briefly.
Yeah, sure. You can, go ahead and plug it. And while you're doing that, folks, if you have any other questions about, boot camps, working in tech, anything else for Randy, let us know. Put those in the chat, and then go ahead and plug a project.
Sure. Also, I would just add, David, that yeah, I think at the end of the day, we are in a very privileged and a very unique time in human history where we have so much knowledge at our fingertips, right? And so I think that in many ways that has led to a kind of democratizing of information where you don't necessarily have to be an Ivy League graduate to know all of these things. This stuff is now made available to anyone with an internet connection, but ultimately it's your capacity for discretion to be curious and to deep dive down into these questions in order to seek out valid and truthful information. So a project that I recently built is something called Code Pencil. It is meant to be a combination of a kind of a scratch pad where if you're someone who knows how to code or has never coded before, you can use this as a place to tinker with things, and you get instantaneous feedback. So here you can see I've just changed the word feedback there. So it's kind of like having a internet-based code editor, but for people who are just learning, I have a series of templates that are there to help people grasp the basics. So you can learn about different CSS tools. The whole thing's free, by the way, just for people to use I use it as a teaching tool sometimes when I'm workshopping things with people. And it also has a practice button where you can study. If you're learning JavaScript, for example, it will lead you through various things. You can try and write some code, and then you grade yourself on how good of a job that you think you did, and then it will continuously remind you with these different tests until you feel comfortable that you've learned those topics. So it's kind of a study guide and just a free tool for people to use as a kind of code playground while you're learning. And I think that's
so
probably
cool.
it for me.
Thank you, Randy. That's awesome. That's interesting. Are you convincing me to work in software? That's cool. Well, thank you so much, Randy. I know you put a lot of coding together for this. You also, coding live, like we talked about with Nathan, can be really stressful. I'm sure you never know what's going to happen.
That's true.
So I just want to go ahead and wrap it up there. I'd like to invite anyone else in the audience with questions. Please go ahead. While you're thinking of those questions, just one more time, I'm putting in the website here. So this leads to our website. We are running Seattle-based programs, but everything for our boot camps is virtual. So the reason that we link it to Seattle is because you get that UW, University of Washington micro-credential. But depending where you are in the States, we have lots of different industry partners and university partners to bring credibility to our boot camps. So check out what we offer, see if that's anything interests you. Another thing I would love to do is throw my email address in here. Let me know, folks, if you want to ask any more specific questions, if you want to connect with any of our admissions advisors, if you want to ask questions about what the career program is, if you'd like to connect with Randy about what kind of things he does as an instructor, please do let me know. And let us know. It looks like there might be 1 or 2 more questions. I love this question from Eugenia. Do we think AI can achieve consciousness? I think this should be our last question of the day. Let us know, Randy. What do you think?
It's a very hard question. I've certainly seen in my own experiments with these things. So I was part of some early access programs from OpenAI. So I've been tinkering with these models for about 5 years. And the models that I had access to had considerably less safeguards because they were still ironing a lot of that out. And so I would say that the raw models can exhibit very convincing behavior. With that said, the way that these models work is they're designed to predict the next best word to say. So when you give it a prompt, it's going to go, okay, what would be the best first word for me to reply to you? And it's going to use its neural network and it's going to come up with the word the. Then it's going to go, okay, what's the second best word that I could pick? And so I think that model of prediction where, well, I'll say this. The current models essentially use statistics and like linear algebra to make predictions. That to me does not sound like a recipe for the lights being on the inside. I don't know whether we have a good definition for what our consciousness is yet. So that would make it very hard to determine whether a machine has that. I think we're still trying to figure out what our own is, to be perfectly honest. But based on my current understanding of these models, I don't think that the lights are on. That doesn't necessarily mean that there might not be another technological revolution down the road, but these current the RLHF, the reinforcement learning with human feedback models that are the most popular with OpenAI and those things. I don't think so. And I think that anybody from any of those companies that says so probably has their stock prices on their minds.
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you so much. We can go ahead and wrap it up there, Randy. I really appreciate your time and showing us some inside baseball and some of the coding stuff. Thank you to all of our participants. Thank you for all of our questions. You're correct. I just saw this in the chat. Maybe we are in a simulation. So be it. If so, might as well get your software development micro-credentials to fight the AI war. So I put some links up in a notification. Once again, folks, please reach out if you have questions, you want to chat about anything, anything you'd like as a follow-up today, let us know. And otherwise, we will see you guys next time. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you all enjoy your weekend.
Thanks everyone.